All right, so welcome back to the NoFX podcast. We're back with episode number 6, so we have actually beaten the record. This podcast has stayed together longer than my last one.
Hooray.
Now the next milestone is episode 100. If we can get there, then we'll beat my other podcast from years ago. But welcome back. I'm your hostess, Lane, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Hercules. What's up, man?
What's going on, everybody?
Because we started that series last time, we wanted to kind of try and run through those each week or each couple of weeks until we completed our little series, but bigger and better things came along in the way of March of the Machines and the full spoiler season ending a few days ago. By the time you see this, you'll have probably seen a few other people put out videos. We wanted to get this recorded a little bit earlier, but life happens. Either way, we're getting it done now. The set hasn't fully released. Pre-release happened this past weekend. We're recording on Monday, so I believe the full set releases this Friday at some point, or maybe this weekend. I don't remember the exact release date, but it's coming this weekend.
Even that's not a hard and fast rule like it used to be anymore with Wizards. They're kind of playing it all over the place right now.
Yeah. So, anyways, we managed to take a look at the lists ourselves, and just like we did with the All Will Be One set, we put together a list of the 10 best cards that we saw for cEDH. But spoiler alert, I had a really hard time narrowing it down to 10. We both brought quite a few cards to the table. I think we had closer to 30, and narrowed it down to 10 with like 10 more honorable mentions that we're going to run through kind of briefly here at the beginning. So we would like to just kind of preface this like we did last time, that this is in no particular order. This isn't a power level thing. Some of the honorable mentions have nothing to do with cEDH. They're just cards we thought were cool, but we still think that these cards will see play, even some of the honorable mentions in more edge cases. And it's all subjective. This is our opinions. You may think something's garbage that we like, and vice versa. And that's okay. But this set was kind of one of the more powerful sets for cEDH that we've seen in quite a while. So had a hard time with this because it's just, there's a lot of cards to talk about. So if the card you think is the best card in the set doesn't get mentioned, sorry. We probably left out something that we could have mentioned as it is. So either way.
That's good. It's a good problem to have. There's a lot of good stuff here, so.
Yeah, I mean, it could be worse. We could be, stuck with another post Eldraine set where it was like, what's happening? Where'd the power go? So we haven't had a huge amount of power. I mean, yes, there's been power creep, but like the last few standard sets haven't had a whole lot for us to talk about. So these last couple, I think, have been pretty good for cEDH in general and other formats as well. So without further ado, we're just going to jump right in with our honorable mentions, which, again, we have several of, so we're not going to spend a whole hell of a lot of time on them. We've got 12 of them, so we're going to try and run through them pretty quickly. Most of them are either fringe case playables in cEDH, or they're for completely different formats. We'll start here. One that I put on here mainly because, just like last time, I built a competitive Pauper Commander version of this creature, and it is the Khenra Spellspear, which is for 1 and a red, it's a 2/2 Jackal Warrior with Trample and Prowess, which that's whenever you cast a non-creature spell, it gets +1/+1 till end of turn. It also has for 3 and a Phyrexian blue, you can transform it, activate only as a sorcery. At that point, it becomes a Phyrexian, and it still has Trample, but gains Ward 2, and an additional Prowess, so it has Prowess twice. I've already played this a couple times. It can get pretty big pretty fast, and if you can give it things like Double Strike, which is readily available in red in Pauper Commander, you can pump him up to an 8/8 and give him Double Strike and just eliminate people outright. So it is limited by being kind of a Spellslinger deck, so you don't have a lot of creatures, and it is a creature heavy meta, which can kind of be detrimental to your life total, but generally speaking, pretty cool card. I think this might even see play in some, regular, casual, Spellseeker or Spellslinger kind of lists that could benefit off of it. You could also be playing it, with other prowess cards in that case, and perhaps have a good time with it, but obviously not. I don't think good enough for competitive. I don't know any deck that would really want this. It's not doing anything to win, and it's kind of costly to get to where you want it to be. But as far as creatures go for Pauper Commander, though, it's pretty fucking cool. A lot of people were pretty hyped about this one.
Nice.
And then you had one that you found that's also Pauper playable and comes with an interesting combo. Which one was that?
So that would be Hangar Scrounger. So it's 1 red and 2 for a 2/1 dwarf pilot. It's got the new mechanic Backup 1. So when this creature enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. If that's another creature, it gains the following ability until end of turn. And that ability is whenever this creature becomes tapped, you may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. So the 2 cards that come to mind with this, being an Unctus player occasionally. Aphedo Alchemist, it's a blue creature. It's like 1 blue and 1 for a wizard. It can tap to untap target permanent, but it can untap itself. So if this Hangar Scrounger enters the battlefield, put the 1/1 counter on Aphedo Alchemist, tap the Alchemist, discard a card, draw a card, untap the Alchemist, targeting itself, wash, rinse, repeat. You can mill through draw through your entire library. There is a card called the Seeker of Skybreaker, which is 1 green and 1 for a 2/1 common, and it's tapped to untap target creature. So it can tap to untap itself. Same combo, but it's Pauper legal, and you Pauper players might figure out something to do with this. I have no clue what that would be, but it's available, so there you go.
Greater minds than mine that have been playing this for a while. If you're watching, please, in the comments or elsewhere, find me, let me know, because I'm interested in trying to break that. I actually also, when you first brought up the...
the Hangar Scrounger?
Yeah, when you first brought up this creature to begin with, my thought was it's a dwarf, and gives this ability to, another creature that might also be a dwarf, but obviously in Magda you need certain tools to tap your dwarves to make more, outside of just going to combat. There are certain tools. There's a dwarf bloodletter, I think it is, that you can use it to tap down other dwarves to do things like to pump it up or something, which you really don't care about the pump. You just care about being able to use that as an outlet to tap down your dwarves. So this one having this ability on it can make it to where, you could give it to another dwarf, both of them tap through some means to give you treasures through Magda, but then also you get a couple loots as well, or whatever that is. Loot or rummage, I can't remember.
Yeah.
Either way, I don't know if it is good enough for Magda, but just it being a dwarf, kind of that brought it to mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Any dwarfs, Magda players will at least take a peek at, no doubt.
Next one, I kind of wanted to. It's not so much that it directly compares to the mental. What was it called?
Minor Misstep.
Minor Misstep, yeah. So instead of Mental Misstep, it was Minor Misstep, and that was the one where it was like 2 mana or 1 mana counter target CMC 1 or less spell. And we were saying last set release that. It could have potential in some edge case counterspell decks that are really heavy. Whatever the case, this is kind of something that's on a similar level, but I would argue is probably more playable in the sense that, okay, it is 1 more mana, but at least it's colorless, and it has modal abilities, which I tend to like. Either way, I still don't think this is like a slam dunk in every deck, but I think that it warrants looking at just because of what it does. In the sense of, okay, here's a 2 mana counter spell. It counters a target spell with mana value 2 or less, which hits a ton of win cons in the format. Also just hits mana rocks and other things if you're just trying to slow somebody down, yada yada. Now granted, there's a lot of counter spells that can do that as well. But then it has the additional text that says counter target red or green spell with mana value 6 or less, which first thing I think of is Seedborn Muse, because as we've talked about, we hate that card. So, I mean, it's a 2 mana counter that. Now, granted, so is Counterspell. So is any other creature-oriented counterspell. But the thing is a lot of people don't play creature-oriented counterspells outside of, like, the Force of Wills and Pact of Negations and stuff. And in that case, they're typically using those to protect their own wins or stop a game-ending combo of sorts. Most spells can't target these specific win cons, but then also target these larger threats, and I think for that reason it is somewhat playable. I just don't know what you cut for it, and it's so I think you have to be in a meta where you have like Gruul or a lot of players on those colors. But if you're playing with a lot of Thrasioses, this counters not only Thrasios but Seedborn Muse and Underworld Breach and yada yada.
Right.
Yada, so
you're probably playing delay over this most of the time, but there are edge cases where, like you said, like a Baral deck or something could look at another counter spell, and this might be better than a current option they have. So
I think having flexibility in your counterspell packages is good too. So it's something I like the space that they're exploring, and it's not that they haven't explored the space before, but it's interesting. Is it good? Is it better? That's for you to decide. I just wanted to touch on it because it was very similar to that last one. I'm gonna run straight into this one too because I put this on the list and you didn't touch on it at all. This next one is an enchantment called Chivalric Alliance. So it's 1 and a white. It's an enchantment. Whenever you attack with 2 or more creatures, draw a card. So more white card draw. Now this is situational in the sense that you usually are only getting 1 attack a turn, so you're only drawing one card a turn. But on top of your Esper Sentinels and your Archivists of Ogmas and maybe something else that you have going on, this is just another layer of that. And if you're already running those and you're in a deck that's going to be creating tokens, say you have Myrel or you have Adeline or something that's creating a bunch of spirits or birds or whatever, there are a lot of decks that do that thing and they're in white. Now, is this good in Winota? Probably not as well. It's also got this second line of text that can be useful, I suppose, in certain circumstances where it's pay 2 generic, discard a card, create a 2/2 white and blue night creature token with vigilance. So who cares about the creature token most of the time, but maybe you need that creature token to sack for, who knows, your diabolic intent. Or in some cases, maybe you just have this out there for just the incidental card draw that it's going to give you. That's what it's going to be most of the time. And I don't know if that makes a cut in lots of decks, but I think it does in decks that are making those kinds of token strategies. Or just, decks with a lot of hate bears. You're already stacking the board. This is just another piece that's out there helping you get card advantage, helping you break parity. And I think that's good. Is it going to see play in 5-color decks? No, of course not. But it's a thing.
And the discard outlet could be relevant if you have some weird reanimator strategy. Who knows? Somebody could make this very interesting.
If you're in World Gorger or something, because you could be in Boros, World Gorger doing something like that, and maybe it does something. I don't know. I just like that white's getting a lot of variety of card draw finally, and
Absolutely.
It's less limited, and you don't have to fucking pay mana for it. So it's pretty good.
Heck yeah.
You can take the next one, Surge.
Is it Surge of Salvation? So this one, it's 1 white mana instant. You and permanents you control gain hexproof until end of turn. Prevent all damage that black and or red sources would deal to creatures you control this turn. So it's kind of the equivalent. What are we talking about? The Autumn of Veil, the non-draw one, whichever one the bad one is.
It's more Autumn's Veil than it is Veil of Summer, because Veil of Summer
draws
gives you the hexproof. It also makes it so where your stuff can't be countered, and it draws you a card.
This one's more counter or removal spell on something, or if someone's going to brain freeze you out, cast this and they can't because you have hexproof as a player. And again, this one in a 5-color deck is this going to see the light of day? Never. But in low color decks, or sometimes even in a Naya deck or something, if you're trying to win with a Heliod Ballista combo or something, and you need to have your permanents not be bounced to hand, not be blinked or anything crazy like that, they need to be on the battlefield, and you need to protect them from a removal spell and still go off. Maybe. This is kind of I think there's a 1 white mana spell that counters a spell that targets a permanent you control that randomly sees play occasionally. Yeah. And this is certainly better than that. So who knows? This definitely could see some play.
Yeah, I agree. It's not perfect, but it is kind of like that reprieve we're getting from the Lord of the Rings set that is basically white remand, and that's not a counter spell. It just puts the spell back in their hand. But a lot of times they can't recast it. So pretty good. This is kind of it's just giving white more options that it hasn't had, or that it has had, but it's just in a different way. I think it's the selection of tools that white got in this set is pretty good.
Yeah, agreed.
Next one up is Omen Hawker. This is a 1 mana 1/1 that has the activated ability tap, add colorless and blue. Spend this mana only to activate abilities. This seems like a slam dunk in Kinnan. It seems like a slam dunk in Thrasios lists that it may be less, in either they're still green, so they're still running plenty of mana dorks. But this is, kind of like an additional, let's say, like training center, right? It's training center, but on a body, because it's making your Thrasios activation cost 2 less. And if you look at it in that way, yeah, sure, it's easier to remove or whatever, but I mean, don't most Thrasios players have training center and also the
Biomancer's Familiar?
Right. So, like, what's wrong with having another one? I see no problem with that. Also, this can be used in, like, say, maybe not polymorph, but in any deck that's using an artifact that needs an activation, this can help speed that along.
It's a body for Gaia's Cradle. It's a body for Neoform and Eldritch Evolution, or to pitch to survival. If you're pitching something to survival, if you draw this, it's got potential.
It's not amazing. It's not the best mana dork I've seen, but for 1 mana, giving you 2 is pretty nice, and it's relevant for blue in that a lot of blue decks are running a lot of artifacts that will have activated abilities, maybe even equipments, things that you're going to use the mana on. So I think it's pretty good.
You might actually get to untap your mana vault occasionally with this in play.
Right? I mean, it'll help, if nothing else.
Right.
What's next?
What do we have next? We have Infernal Sovereign next. So this one, 2 black and 4 for a 6/6 flying trampled demon. Skip your draw step. Whenever you play a land or cast a spell, you draw a card and lose 1 life. We were talking about this one. There's a specific deck that you have in mind that you have built that you were excited to see this in. And I think this one definitely sees potential. It might see a slight resurgence because of this and another card later in this set we're going to talk about. And that deck is
Kalia. The OG Kalia. I think this is good because it can be cheated in with her, and then, yeah, granted, you now no longer have a draw step, but you just hit somebody for 6/6 flying in the air, if not a little less because you trampled over something. And then anytime you play a land or cast a spell, you draw a card and lose a life. So this could potentially be like a Bolus of Citadel for you.
Yeah.
It will whiff eventually, because eventually you're going to not have a land drop and you're not going to have any more mana to cast anything. But per turn, you're probably going to see more cards than you would with just that draw step. So, seems powerful. I'm considering slotting out. So, I've been running. I don't remember who built it originally, but there was a database list at some point. It was on World Gorger Dragon, and it was on the several demons that are fairly good. And one of them was Doom Whisperer, and I kind of think that this is better than Doom Whisperer, and I think that's where I make the cut. It is 1 more mana than Doom Whisperer, but just a better ability overall. Surveilling is fine when you're in Wargorger, but because, as we said, there are some other pieces that might go into the Kalia list, I think Wargorger might be coming out because it has kind of fallen out of favor, and there are actually other ways to win without needing it. So
yeah, and it's just a big storm turn type effect. I mean, you're just everything you're drawing or everything you're playing, including lands, is replacing themselves. It's a 1 life loss is super negligent. It's pretty good.
It also might see play in decks like Crick or other low color black decks that just need more card draw, because black, despite having some really good powerful card draw, also is kind of lacking in card draw most of the time. If you aren't drawing all your deck, you're drawing just 1 extra card here or there. So in that sense, I think it's a pretty good engine. Next one is Dance with Calamity. This is being called the red ad nauseum, and it is definitely not that, but it has some similarities in design and feel that I can see why people make the correlation. I'm not high on it. It feels like it wants a very specific deck, or it wants very specific build around, and I don't like that, especially from a sorcery, but here we are. It's a 8 mana, 1 red, 7 generic sorcery. It says shuffle your library. As many times as you choose, you may exile top card of your library. If the total mana value of the cards exiled this way is 13 or less, you may cast any number of spells from among those cards without paying their mana costs. So this means you can start exiling, and you're going to eventually get to 13 CMC, and then nothing happens. Those cards just stay exiled. And this spell fizzles, and you're basically sitting there with your pants down. So you have to either be doing kind of the ad nauseam strategy where you have a really low curve filled with cards you're going to be able to do good things with, or you're going to want to have like the ability to hit like one big spell with this and cast it for free. But then it's almost that why bother? Like that seems silly when you could just like if you're going to do that, play Mizzix's Mastery and entomb your Adna so you can cast it for 4 mana instead of 5. But then technically it's still 5 mana, so it's just spread out over turns. I digress. This is cool. It has the ability to be like a Stormy Finisher, I think in a Burgy list or something that's making mana for you or drawing cards for you as you're casting spells is going to be cool. I saw someone mention that you could use stuff like Top or Scroll Rack even to try and like manipulate your library a little bit more while you're doing this. But I don't know that you can. I mean, I think that's part of the resolution is you have to like, I think you have to do that prior and see what you're getting. And then you can kind of go, okay, now I know like I used my Scroll Rack and I flip-flop stuff around and I know now I can cast these things perfectly. And then you just cast this and you cast all those things for free and cool.
Yeah, but the problem is you shuffle the library every time in between this, right? So that's the only thing that wouldn't work with that, right?
Oh, so it yeah, okay, so I guess I don't even know how this card works yet. So
yeah, it's bonkers. We were talking a little bit about it. I think one of the weird edge case scenarios, someone will play this for 8 mana or less somehow to exile their entire library. You don't have to stop once you hit 13. It doesn't automatically fizzle. You can just keep going and exile as much of your library as you want. So if you're on Labman or if you're on the blue Jace that wins that way, or if you have Thoracle in hand, boy, you can cast this, exile your whole library, and then win that way. But that's going super deep in the tank there.
So I mean, I guess if you're an Izzet, that's fine because there isn't really a lot of other ways to get rid of your library. So like this just made Thoracle work in a different color pair that it didn't really work in without doing different stuff.
There's an old blue enchantment. There's like 2 blue and 2. You can exile the top card of your library to prevent damage or something. And so that one's just a straight blue. You can do it, and it's a lot better. So I don't know if this one will ever see play. It's interesting. I'm sure I'll eat my words, and somebody will slam this down and then defeat me with it. But it's kind of out there.
Well, another thing that I brought up too is that you could theoretically build a deck that had minimal cards, mostly lands, and then just exile, and there's no way you go over 13, and then you're in the same boat where you've exiled your library and now you Thoracle or whatever. But you still kind of are in the same boat where it's like, why? You can do it way easier, and there's no point. I think this is just better as a Storm Finisher. You got something that's making you mana while you're going and doing the thing, and then you cast a few spells, and then you're done. And then you move on with your life. I think that's really all there is to say about it.
This one I'm kind of excited about. So Chrome Host Seedshark. It's 1 blue and 2 for a 2/4 flying Phyrexian shark. Whenever you cast a non-creature
spell, say
spell,
that 3 times fast.
It's a mouthful, and the artwork is it's something to behold. So it's whenever you cast a non-creature spell, incubate X, where X is that spell's mana value. So incubate, another new mechanic. It's create an incubator token with X +1/+1 counters on it. And 2 colorless, transform this artifact. It transforms into a 0/0 Phyrexian artifact creature. Of note, the incubate tokens themselves are artifacts as well. So the deck that comes to mind immediately with this one is the Urza Lord, which is Lord High Artificer. Is that the one that makes that ETBs and makes a construct?
Yep.
Taps. Yeah.
That's the
that
normal
one.
polymorph one.
Yeah. But so this and a non-polymorph version of that. I've seen there's polymorph builds of that and non-polymorph builds of that. And I think this finds a home right away in the non-polymorph builds. Every non-creature spell you cast in that, it's kind of like having not a rampant growth, but what's the one that puts a forest into play untapped?
Nature's Lore.
Revisits or Nature's Lore. It's like almost stapling that to every single spell they're playing because they're getting a free untapped artifact, which they can tap for mana.
Yeah.
Galazeth, maybe. Brutaclad, maybe, if those decks ever see the light of day anymore. But also look at this. But I think that's a pretty interesting one. I mean, being a 2/4 flyer, it also blocks quite a bit in the format.
Yeah, it's not going to kill your crumbs, but it'll block most of the things you're going to... It blocks Malcolm very handily, so I mean...
Yeah, very, very much. Blocks Najila, blocks Malcolm, blocks Timna. So
yep.
and for 3 mana for a 2/4 flyer,
That's
pretty
not
decent
bad
value.
by itself. Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's one of those things I think any Spellslinger deck can use if you have some way to maybe, you could probably get into some blasting station loops with this, or grinding station, whichever grinding station I think is the one that you have to sack artifacts. But so you could potentially be doing some mill shenanigans with this because you cast a spell and then you get a thing and then you mill the thing and then another one comes in and blah blah blah. Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's and obviously you can at some point it's a mana sink too. So like if you got nothing going on that turn, you go, okay, well, I'm gonna make 3 of these into 1/1s and then attack with them or whatever. So yeah, it's got, and then it's also sacrifice fodder for other things as well. So,
For sure.
Not terrible. Another one that I really kind of wanted to put on the main list, but then the more I started looking at it and reading it and thinking about it, the more I was like, it's probably not a slam dunk in most decks. It's probably not a slam dunk as a commander, but it's going to get built. It's going to see play for sure. I just don't know exactly if it's better in the 99 or the command zone. But this is a cycle of Praetors that they did again. It's all 5 of the Praetors. Each one of them mono-colored, and on its front side is the legendary creature version, and on the back side is a saga. People were talking up the Elish Norn to me the other day, but that was because they were in the pre-release and constructed, sealed, and yeah, it's a slam dunk there, but in competitive, it's slow as shit. Urabrask is more competitively costed in that he's 2 and 2 red. As a commander, not bad rate, not a bad body. It's a 4/4. Has first strike, so can kill some things without having to worry about it. Notably, whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, it deals 1 damage to target opponent, and you add a red. So it's got Burgy vibes, but you're doing damage at the same time. It is only on instants and sorceries. You don't get the non-creature clause, but it's still probably good enough. The issue I find is if it is a mono red deck, what are you doing spell slinging wise, like to where this is going to ever get you there? It doesn't say cast or copy. If it did, then maybe you could be like, yeah, get some storm stuff in there that are actual storm cards and get 5 or 6 triggers and ding somebody for some damage, make some mana, do some more. But I guess probably the design space they were going for was, okay, you cast that instant or sorcery, it deals the damage to an opponent. You add red, you use the red to immediately use his next line of text, which is exile and return it to the battlefield transformed. And then at that point, it is the Saga, the Great Work. First step at ETBs, it does 3 damage to target opponent and each creature they control. So that's a pretty powerful, it's an Anger of the Gods effect. Only for one creature or one player, but the most problematic player that has to stack pieces or hate bears that are killing you, or just has the most dorks, or whatever value you can get out of it, you're going to do a little bit of a Klasm. On the next turn, you're going to create 3 treasure tokens. On the third turn, until the end of that turn, you can cast instant sorceries from any graveyard, so you get a mnemonic betrayal kind of effect. So you can either utilize your own spells again, or you can start stealing other people's stuff to tutor, or whatever the case may be. And then any of the cards you cast from their graveyards get exiled, so they don't get them again. So if it is something that they may want to try and use again, you get rid of it. So that's kind of cool. Then it gets exiled, flips back into Urabrask, and you start the loop again. The issue I find here is that you can't do anything to cheat this along. I suppose there's proliferation and stuff that does work on with these counters, but I don't know that the triggers happen if you proliferate.
I think they do, but I could be wrong. But either way, it's like you said,
yeah, like you're not really able to loop this to where you're like, you're probably having more luck doing the front side and just trying to ping people and making mana and trying to steamroll through like Burgy style patterns until you can't anymore, and you save 1 red mana and you flip him and get the extra damage and the extra value after that, and then you just try again in a couple turns. But during those 3 turns, you lose. So this is why it ended up on the honorable mentions and not the main.
Can I just say, I hope at some point they release a full art foil text list version of all of these Praetors, because good lord, I don't think I've ever seen a card with so many words on it. I just want to see them print a textless one just to mess with people. Anyway.
I mean, if nothing else, just because the artwork's cool too.
But yeah, but look at all the words on both sides. It's like, good grief.
It is a lot of words. All right, so next one is your baby.
Going with Kroxa and Kunoros. So this one I'm pretty excited about. It's definitely a deck I'm building, and it's 3 mana. Three generic red, white, black for a 6/6 legendary creature. It's an Elder Giant Dog. It's got Vigilance, Menace, and Lifelink. And when Kroxa and Kunoros enters the battlefield or attacks, you may exile 5 cards from your graveyard. When you do, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So the altar, Phyrexian altar? I think I have it right in front of me. I was building the deck earlier.
Phyrexian altar as you colorless or any color mana. Ashdod's altar is 2 colorless, and then there's Altar of Dementia, which is the
Altar of Dementia. I found it. Sorry. So Altar of Dementia. It's 2 colorless. Yeah. Sacrifice a creature. Target player mills cards equal to the sacrifice creature's power. So the idea behind this card being a 1-card win con, you get your Altar of Dementia in play, you cast the Kroxa or attack with it, sack it in response to its own trigger, milling yourself 6 cards, put this in the graveyard, use its trigger to return itself, exiling 5 cards, leaving whatever 1 card you want out of those 6 in your graveyard, and then repeat it, and you repeat it, and you repeat it, and you can mill your entire library into your graveyard. You want to stop the loop. There's several creature iterations that'll work. One that I'm playing with currently is Karmic Guide and Abdel Adrian. Karmic Guide will come into play, returning Abdel. Abdel will exile the Karmic Guide. You can sack Abdel to the Phyrexian altar, or the Altar of Dementia. Good God, I'll get this right one of these days. The Altar of Dementia to mill an opponent 4 cards. It'll return Karmic Guide, which will then return Abdel, wash, rinse, repeat. You'll end up with an infinite army of 1/1s as well, in case somebody has a Shuffle Titan effect and you can't win that way. There are other ones with the Radiant Archangel. No, what the heck is it? Angel of something. Angel of Glory's Rise or something. I think it's the one that it comes into play and returns all humans from your graveyard to the battlefield.
Oh.
I think it's Angel of Glory's Rise, but don't quote me on that. I'd have to look it up.
100%.
Yeah, and there's like Fiend Hunter. I think it's like a 1/3 that when it ETBs, you exile a creature. Same kind of a loop. You just exile the Angel, sack the Fiend Hunter, mill somebody 1, Angel comes back, blah, blah, blah. That one has the advantage of returning all humans in your graveyard to the battlefield and exiling all zombies, I think, when it ETBs. So, I think that one personally, I think it's the weaker combo because you can't really cast that card for value most of the time. You can cast a Karma Guide or an Abdel for a lot of value earlier. Both are better with Animate Dead. Anyway, choose your flavor, but that's the idea behind the deck, and I think it's pretty strong. It's a 6 mana Mardu commander, so that's a little bit rough, but I think it's pretty strong.
I was gonna say that's the only downside I really see. It's cool. I love Mardu. I love the colors. I've built. We were just talking about Kalia. I built Edgar Markov back in the day. I have a Timna Rograk list. Like, I've built several Mardu and/or Rakdos and/or Orzhov lists over the years. So definitely a fan. I like the style that it's going for. It is a big body. It's got relevant keywords. So I mean, it also lends itself to just being a fucking hateful stacks deck that can also just beat you down with a 6/6. So
true.
Yeah, I mean, I don't hate it. I just don't like it because it's 6 mana, and I know that I play commanders that are that expensive all the time, and I know it's possible to do, and yada yada, and that's why you play stacks, so you can slow everybody else down. But yeah, like, I don't know. I guess at first glance, it didn't speak to me. After you told me about what you could do with it, I'm a little more interested. But that's kind of the issue with all of these team-ups that I found, is that they all have something they can do. It's not always immediately obvious, and then in the cases where it is obvious, it's boring. This is not obvious, so I'm interested with that. I'd like to see it in action sometime, and you'll have to play it.
Heck yeah, we'll do.
So last one, another one that I kind of wanted to have on the list, but we just couldn't narrow it any further, is the new Heliod, where he's white on the one side and gets flipped into a Phyrexian. He's gotten completed 2. It's Heliod the Radiant Dawn. It's 2 double white, 4/4 on the front side. Legendary enchantment creature god. When it ETBs, return target enchantment card that isn't a god from your graveyard to your hand. So it is a little bit of recursion, but probably not being used most of the time. Then for 3 and a Phyrexian blue, you can transform it into dun dun dun. It is Heliod, the Warped Eclipse, which is a Phyrexian god. And so this is now a 4/6. And notably, this is the first time I can think of where these old school Theros gods were not tied to devotion. He's a creature immediately on the front and the back. There's no devotion. All of the other ones have always been devotion. So that's interesting.
They've lost their devotion.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he got completed. What do you expect? Now he worships science, as one does when they lose faith. But so it says you may cast spells as though they had flash, which that alone is pretty decent. And seen a lot of different creatures along the years that have been able to do something like that. And then uniquely, it says spells you cast cost 1 less to cast for each card your opponents have drawn this turn. So that sounds bad off the bat. Like, why would I want my opponents to draw more cards? Why do I want to play Howling Mine and cEDH? That's terrible. Wouldn't actually be too terrible for him. I mean, I guess, considering you have Flash, every time somebody draws a card, so each player's turn, each one of your opponent's turns, at minimum, your spells cost 1 generic less to cast because they've drawn a card. If they do anything else, if they have a fish, if they have an Esper Sentinel, if they're just drawing cards, if they have that fucking demon we just talked about, anything that's drawing them extra cards is reducing your costs. So naturally, people were like, throw a bunch of wheels in this deck, Bob's your uncle, now you can cast pretty much everything you have for just its colored mana. So you can do dumb shit like Enter the Infinite or whatever else that your heart desires. And in that instance, very powerful, sounds good. But from what I've read and heard and talked about, it is a glass cannon. It folds to basically minimal stacks. Recently, I played with somebody who built a version of it that was more stacks and less wheels. It only had like 1 wheel in the whole list and was more dependent on just being able to break parity because that card draw per turn or their heuristic studies or their whatevers was enough for him to be able to just be like, okay, on your end step, I flash in this piece that I want on my turn, you know, or I cast this spell for next to nothing because you drew a bunch of cards. And in that case, it's kind of cool, but it also was kind of counterintuitive. But he managed to slam a bunch of shit on the board and get a really solid win in one of them because we were just basically locked out of the game. So it can do different things, and for that, it's cool. But we decided it didn't make the top cut, and at this rate, I don't know. Do you have anything to add about Heliod?
I mean, giving your hate bears flash is kind of interesting, but yeah, it's definitely one like we talked about. There's a lot of potential here, but I don't know if it's better than some of the other options. Maybe in Azorius it's better than some of the options, but yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. So that brings us to the end of our honorable mentions. So now we move on to the actual list.
The meat and potatoes.
I want to remind everyone that we are not saying that this is any particular order. I actually removed numbers from the list because numbers don't matter. It's all subjective. These cards are all going to see play guaranteed, and that doesn't mean that necessarily they're going to be in every deck that can play them, but they're all going to see play for sure. I can guarantee it. I don't know for how long, because that's part of the issue with new cards, is that they come along, they seem broken, we use them for a while, and then something new comes along, and we're like, this is better than that last thing, and the cycle continues. But regardless of us being in an eternal format, we still rotate just like everybody else. It just takes us longer.
Yep.
So, I'm going to take the lead on this one. We'll start with... I'm the stacks guy, so I have to. It's Phyrexian Censor. We've gotten another Rule of Law effect. And I have one deck that runs all of them because it's Azorius, so it gets Arcane Laboratory. So this one probably goes in that list. I don't think that there's any combos in that deck that care about the rest of it. Well, let's read the text here. So it's a 2 generic, 1 white, 3/3, which is a pretty solid body considering most of them are smaller. Each player can't cast more than 1 non-Phyrexian spell each turn, which each of them have always had something like that. You know, Aethasworn Cannon is non-artifact. There's other ones that's Deafening Silence is non-creature. All the rest of them are just hard, only 1 spell per turn. So it does have an out, and there are a couple, like there's, what's it called? See some play?
And Revoker, yep.
So there's that.
I got a couple mention on that one when you get all the way through, but finish it up, then we'll...
I mean, obviously, we've been talking about the Praetors and some of the other Phyrexians that have come along in the last couple sets, so... There's some that are probably going to be in some decks where you're like, oh, cool, this one doesn't come in tapped. Or, like, you didn't get to stop that guys from coming in tapped. But, because you can't cast them and then non-Phyrexian creatures enter the battlefield tapped, which that's kind of your Archon of Emeria tapped on, but instead of lands, it's creatures. or that's more like Thalia. But regardless, it's a rule of law with some upside, but also some downside depending on your deck building restrictions. So like this sounds great in like Winota because it's not a human, so it'll trigger, but then when you get to your Kiki combo, everything comes in tapped, and your Kiki combo no longer works. So in any deck that's working with ETB creatures doing things, this is just gonna fuck you. So
yeah,
it is more of a consideration than some of the other rule of laws, I think.
The interesting piece about it too, it is a Phyrexian itself, so when you cast it, it doesn't count itself as a spell, so you can still cast something else.
That's notable compared to most rule of laws, for sure.
Yeah. Winota is a prime example. All the dorks that it has that makes, the Goblin Rabble Masters or the Thalia's, or the, what is it? Thalia's Lieutenant? The Lieutenant that makes 1/1 Flying Thopters, whatever it is. It just shuts down those because those tokens will enter tapped. It's probably not good enough for that. The decks that want to see this, for me, I have Heliod Suncrown, the old Heliod stacks deck. Well, I will definitely play this. Yasharn might play this. Interestingly enough, there are 2 creatures that I believe that don't get shut down in Kiki Jiki combos with this. Village Bellringer, because it'll untap Kiki Jiki and all of your creatures. The other big one, and this is something
even though it comes in tapped, it still does the untap. Okay, itself. So that's good. And
then the other big one is the Deceiver Exarch. They have went back and added Phyrexian creature type to a lot of old creatures. That one's also a Phyrexian, so that one won't be stopped by this. I mean, so there are some ways around it in those decks. I'm with you. I have a deck that plays all the rule of law effects. Ironically, that deck, I'm trying to win with Kiki Jiki and some Birthing Pod lines and some other stuff. This actually will shut down some of the combos that I'm trying for in that deck, so I probably won't see play in that deck. But there are a lot of decks that will play this if they're just looking for hard stacks. Yasharn, like I said, is another great example. If you're just looking to shut down your opponent's stuff, this is pretty solid. And being a 3/3, yeah, it's a big beater compared to a lot of them.
I think the issue mainly with it is that it is a little counterintuitive in that it's great if you throw that down and you don't have any plans on playing any creatures for a while. You're just going to play like more stacks pieces that aren't creatures. It's great because then you're just shutting everybody down. Like, not shutting them down, but you are shutting down their combos, but you're stopping them from being able to use their stuff right away. It shuts off mana dorks, yada yada. So in that sense, it's pretty cool. The issue is like blind obedience does it to your opponents. This does it to you too. So that's what sucks. And I like symmetrical stacks. It's always a challenge in figuring out how to break the parity. And like I said, the deck that I run, all of the stuff, it's Millicent, and it's basically needs all of them to make it to its game plan because it costs so fucking much. And then the rest of what it's trying to do is like turn combos, so those cost a lot too. So it needs the time to get the mana to get going, or to build an army of spirits. So in that instance, this one probably doesn't matter. I mean, it does matter as far as like the new spirits coming in are tapped, but like that also doesn't really matter because you get your triggers as you attack with them. So who cares? Yeah, I'm on the fence about it. Like, I want to say, jam it into every fucking stacks deck, but you have to be more considerate than that because it can hurt your own thing. So if you can craft a list that doesn't care, all the other rule of laws are still going to fit into it. So
for sure.
Yeah. What's next?
Next on the list, we have what I don't know might prove to be one of the strongest cards from the set, and that is Faerie Mastermind. So it is 1 blue and 1 for a 2/1 fairy rogue with flash and flying. Whenever an opponent draws their second card each turn, you draw a card. It also has 3 and a blue. Each player draws a card. So this is going to go in any deck where you want a small evasive flyer that can help deal damage, like a Timna, cough cough.
Also, very much wanted in Edric. Because it's got the rogue subtype, so your prowl thing can work.
Absolutely, and a small evasive flyer that's great for them with flash, so you can also bluff interaction and jam it into turn. I mean,
even Yuriko would like this. I
could see ninjas playing this. I could definitely, especially if you're in some of like the heavier CMC, like the extra turns Yurikos and weird stuff like that. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, and just being able to
the gotcha moment is good.
Yeah, and being able to threaten the old, somebody's Thassa's Oracle demonic consultation when, and you can just slam this in, or if you have it in play, they can't go for it because 1 blue and 3 with their trigger on the stack, draw a card, lose. So you're gonna have to go a little bit harder for the Tainted Pack line.
Well, yeah, and then like we got that in white recently with Lauren of the Third Path because it had that clause where everybody draws a card, and everybody was kind of like lower on that, probably because it was just an ETB blow up creature, not as effective as this. However, I'd say it's pretty close on the same sort of level. The thing that I'm curious about this is, well, I like it for the gotcha moment that somebody their Crom trigger goes and you're like, in response, slam this down, you draw a card too. That's nice. But then, I guess not Crom trigger. That's a bad example because they didn't draw any cards that turn. That's on somebody else's turn. Well, I guess it could be on their turn if they did their own.
Sure. Or Ledger Shredder is another good example. And
sure. So anytime somebody's drawn that extra card, you can get the gotcha moment. But then it has the additional gotcha moment of stopping a Thoracle combo because somebody forgot this was on the board. But I'm curious, is there a way? I don't know. I'm spitballing here, but basically, if you could make infinite mana, but then have Rule of Law to where nobody, or a silence, I guess would be a better example. You silence everyone else, and then you just infinite mana dump into this and make everybody just draw out and lose. Could be a win con on its own.
Absolutely. And if you have more cards in your library, you don't need to do anything else cute. There it is. If you have less cards than everybody in your library, you need to either shuffle in your graveyard in your library, or have like what's Angel's Grace and then jam all this mana. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, absolutely. I think that will see the light of day in a few decks. I'm certain of it. Someone will create infinite blue mana and and draw all of their opponents out. Like you said, behind a silence, a Grand Abolisher, Myrel. Good God, how many of those effects do they need before they're
Ranger.
So this could definitely do it.
Yeah, no, I just thought that right now. Like and all I've seen people talk about was that, yeah, it's cool because it draws you extra cards, and then, it's a small body that's evasive, and then it can slam dunk somebody's win attempt, but can also just be a win attempt in its own.
For sure. And just the incremental draw value. I mean, if someone's, casts a Brainstorm or a Ponder or attacks with a Timna, or, there's a ton of instances where they're drawing multiple cards a turn. You slam this in, you're going to get free value out of it. I think
guess the only issue with that is that because they will get an untap, an upkeep. On upkeep, they could potentially, if they had it in their hand, they could cast the Angel's Grace that they drew.
True.
Or Teferi's Protection, I guess, or whatever.
They would have to have, because you could draw until they drew an extra card and died. So they'd have to be able to cast Angel's Grace. Yeah.
All right, so yeah, cool. It can be a win con. That's an extra added bonus that we just
I see the wheels turning, and his lane is brewing a deck in his brain right now for that exact win con. I see it.
Back to the drawing board. All right, so up next is one that at first I was not high on at all, but the more conversation and things that I've seen people talking about it had to go on the list. It's Hoarding Broodlord. It is a big fuck off dragon that costs 8 mana. It's 5 and 3 black. It is a 7/6 with flying. It does have Convoke, which is why it's so expensive, because Convoke kind of made a thing in this set again. So if you have a ton of little creatures, you can get this out for a little cheaper. That's cool, but the real selling point here is that at ETBs, you search for a card, exile it, and then, as long as it's exiled, regardless of where this Hoarding Broodlord goes, you can play it, meaning it can also be a land if you needed it. And then, while it is on the board, any spell you cast from exile has Convoke. So, if it is an Ad Naus, you can tap 3 creatures and 2 black, and now you can cast an Ad Naus. And it can be used itself for the Convoke, because that has nothing to do with Summoning Sickness. So, that's cool. But what's really cool is when you find little dumb cards from Infinity, because Wizards thought that was a good idea. Yeah. And you get a little card called Saw in Half. Well, this hits the battlefield. You go tutor the Saw in Half. You don't even have to have it already. And then you cast the Saw in Half on this. And then now suddenly you have 2 more. And you get to go tutor up 2 more things. And most of the time, if you tutored 3 times, you're probably winning the game. Most of the time, you're obviously already in black, so you're probably in blue, or you're in Grixis, and you're just going to go get your Thoracle combo, or you're just going to go get your Breach combo, or you're just going to do whatever thing that you need to do to solve your problem. I mean, in some cases, maybe you're just tutoring for an answer to one problem, like a Psych Rift, and then a tutoring for, that last piece to put together your combo, or whatever the case may be. Regardless, also, as we mentioned earlier, this is something I'm thinking about slotting into Thalia to replace the Runescarred Demon, because it does the Runescar Demon thing. It's a little bit more expensive, but can be cheated in just the same because Kalia likes demons, dragons, and angels. And if it's cheated in, it just goes and gets the thing and does all of that on your turn, and then now you maybe just win, depending. So, also any deck that's running any sort of reanimation, you just entomb this thing, you reanimate it, and Bob's your uncle. You tutor up on half and you go to town. So, it being black as well is very good because you can get... It's a demonic tutor, but then it also goes and gets, some of the best cards in the game. So, I don't know what else there's to say about it, really. Do you have any other comments?
The only downside would be the exile part. If someone has a Drannith Magistrate, you can't play the card you tutor for.
That is rough. Sure. But you probably weren't doing this if the Drannith is on the field. You're waiting for that Drannith to get removed. So, yeah, I think that one's pretty cool. You also did mention that it can be something that can be evoed in Tasigur.
Oh, yeah, I guess I forgot about that. Duh, it's been too long since we started brewing about this stuff. Sorry. Yeah, so if you're playing Tasigur, if you have Eldritch Evolution, that's right. Sack this. It's an 8-drop. You could go put this into play right there. So that's another card that's another deck that might see play. Sometimes they played, what's the 7-drop that makes a bunch of slugs and kills things?
Toxtrol.
That one. So this one might be better than that. It depends, I guess, a little bit on your meta choice. If you're trying to draw cards or make slugs or kill the board, then sure, that might be the better choice. But this one just probably finds you a game-winning combo, which... I don't know. If I have my druthers, I'm taking the game-winning combo. So,
I mean, just being able to get Saw in half to go get a 2-card win con right there, that's busted. That's really good. And, I mean, there are games where you're going to have 8 mana laying around. Just incidentally, or you have a ritual in your hand on top of whatever you already have on the board. Yeah.
You can have a few Tevish tokens that are little dorks that can tap to cast this. I mean, yeah.
Right. Yeah, there's lots of different ways you can get this guy out. So I think this one's going to see a lot of play.
Agreed.
Next one I'm excited about, but you take this one.
Cool. That one would be Into the Fire. 1 red and 2 colorless for a sorcery, and it's modal. Choose one. Into the Fire deals 2 damage to each creature, planeswalker, and battle. Or put any number of cards from your hand on the bottom of your library, then draw that many cards plus 1. So the decks that we're thinking about looking at this for, any kind of a polymorph style deck where you're not going to be playing a bunch of little mana dorks that you're going to worry about getting burned out by this. Perfect card for that. It's a removal spell that can wipe the board of all the little dorks, the Dothy Voidwalkers of the world as well, or the Collector Roofs.
I mean, also 2 damage to planeswalkers, not nothing. Because if somebody's already down ticked and they only got 1 or 2 loyalty, this just kills that planeswalker. And battles, we obviously don't know how many of those are going to be viable. We only put 1 on this list, spoilers, but I don't think very many of them, if any, besides the one we picked, are going to see any play.
There's a couple that have a chance, but again, it's too early to see how good they actually are, for sure.
So, I mean, in the future, there may be more battles, but knowing Wizards, we won't see any for a while. Usually, it's a few sets before we revisit a plane or revisit a theme or whatever. In some cases, we never go back to certain planes. In some cases, we never go back to certain mechanics. So, who knows how many more of those we may end up seeing, but if we do end up seeing them... Also, while we're on the subject, what was it that Atraxa did that had to do with battle? It was just there was a battle in the top cards, then you could put them on the field.
One of the card types it can find, yep.
Okay, so, I mean, I guess if you do put the battle that we like, because it can fit into Atraxa, like, this could potentially... not this card, but that card could potentially put it into play, and then when you have this card also in that deck, you go ahead and... Actually, I think that one sans red, so never mind, but you get what I'm saying. Battles will have more presence at some point in the future, I'm sure, so that part of it may become more relevant, but for now, a 2-mana Pyroclasm, good enough. Or, I'm sorry, 3-mana Pyroclasm, not great, but I'm a sucker for modality, and I'm definitely a sucker for self-wheels. There's like the Valakut one, I can't remember the rest of the name, but it's the same thing, but it's got a shitty tap land on the back with it on the front.
Right.
It's the same wheel effect. There's that Heartwarming Redemption in Boros that does that. There's quite a few where it's just dump your hand and draw that many +1. Now, if you've only got 2 cards, you're only drawing 3, but 3 mana draw 3 isn't bad. That's a good rate. So
if you're digging for your win con and you need it, that's one way to go deep into it. And And like I said, just being able to remove the Dothy Voidwalkers or the Collector Roofs of the world that might be able to stop you, along with killing all your opponent's mana dorks, pretty okay.
It kills Grim Hireling, it kills lots of commanders, Tymnas, etc. So I think it's cool.
Kills opposition agent. That's a big thing.
I mean, so like they started doing where I really started noticing them doing this sort of modal. They've had it forever with like the charms and things, but they were always bad. Where they started getting good, especially in red, was like a braid, and then they had like you find some prisoners, and then they had the other one from Innistrad the last time we went, which I can't remember what it does, but it was kind of like a draw 2, discard 2, or deal 3 damage to a thing kind of deal. So like these modal cards that have these abilities, I like because you can put this card in, and instead of having a wheel and a pyroclasm, you just have this. And yes, it's kind of a mesh of both. It's not as good as one or the other, but it's still, and maybe it costs a little more than, in this case, it costs the same as Wheel of Fortune. It costs more than Pyroclasm. So, but to have the best of both worlds, the only thing that is a real bummer is it's a sorcery.
Yeah, which that's the only downside to it. But just giving you options and just the ability to kind of pivot with the card is kind of nice.
I think it's going to see play. Now, will it be a dominant de facto thing for the next few years? Who knows? Something will probably get printed that's better. But it is really, honestly, the only spell that we put in our top 10. So it's got to be something. So speaking of the battles, we've gotten to the one that we picked, which is Evasion of Ikoria. And to be honest, in my opinion, it's not even close. Like, yes, there are a couple that I've seen. There's the blue one that'll tutor you an instance or sorcery, which is not terrible, but like the backside is not good. In the case of this one, the backside isn't great either, but it's also not bad, like as finishers go. But so front side, it's a 2 green and X. It's a 6. What did they say it's called? Like
some kind of defender counters or something. I can't even remember what they're called.
Combat token or some shit. So it's got it's basically got 6 toughness. So it can be hit 6 times. And when the way the siege and battle mechanic works is that these are put on an opponent's board and anyone can attack it. And they're basically assigned to defend it. And the point is that the backside is supposed to be so good that they actually want to defend it so that it doesn't get flipped, so that you don't get the cool thing that's on the back. And in most cases, like I said, they're not great. It's this one we're really here just focusing on that this is a kind of worse Finale of Devastation, but in the sense that it's still a green put to the battlefield tutor. It still has the option to search your library and graveyard. The limitation here is it has to be a non-human creature. Most of the time when you're tutoring, you're not tutoring a human anyway, so that's not really too much of a limitation. It's got to be mana value, X or less, but it goes on the battlefield. And then, if at some point somebody does kill the thing, it becomes Zalortha, Apex of Ikoria, which is an 8/8 reach dinosaur fuck-off creature that says, for each non-human creature you control, you may have that creature assign its combat damage, though it weren't blocked. So definitely a finisher, definitely something that people don't really want you to have. You're also not going to probably spend very many resources going towards it because you probably use this to tutor up a combo piece and you're just going to win. But in the case that you're just using it to tutor up any piece, seems pretty good. I mean, why not have another finale? Any other to the battlefield tutors in green are pretty much played. So I think this sees play.
And like finale, it can pull from library or graveyard, which is super relevant. The big couple things about this, I looked it up there. I think their defense counters is what it said, similar to Planeswalker loyalty.
Right.
So what's really interesting about battles is they actually enter the battlefield on your battlefield, assigned essentially to an opponent to defend it. Which where that's super relevant. This is a permanent spell, so not only does it dodge miscast and dispel and muddle the mixture and flusterstorm and swan song,
pretty much everything, because there's no counterspell that says counter target battle.
I mean, yeah, like an offer you can't refuse and force a will and pact of negation or force of negation, pact of negation still hit it, but the other ones really don't.
Right.
But the other big piece about this too is it enters the battlefield under your control, assigned essentially to an opponent. you could Chain of Vapor this back to your own hand
and use it again,
and then recast it, and then you could copy the Chain of Vapor and bounce the target you actually want to chain if it's an opponent's stacks piece that's stopping you. But yeah, the fact that you could bounce this back to your own hand to reuse is pretty nutty.
Also, you can do things like, you know, direct damage spells to it if you really want the backside creature. And if you're in a deck, you know, green obviously has a lot of stompy creatures, but even let's say you're just in an Elf Ball deck. Elf Ball, now you flip him and you've got all of your elves can assign damage if they're not blocked, and then you just swing and you're fucking getting through with all your creatures. Now, granted, elves are not a great example as far as like putting through a lot of damage, but this could just be another finisher, especially if you have like an Azuri or something where you can pump, and then you don't have to worry about having trample or evasion. You just swing in with all of your little 4/4 8/8 elves and Bob's your uncle. So,
and yeah, there could be a Yasharn deck, a big heavy stacksy deck where it could look for something like this to play to not only get value out of the front side, but also beat the junk out of it, turn it into a giant 8/8, and then just start beating face. Not irrelevant.
Right. I
just like the fact that you can bounce it and reuse it. I think that's going to be, something's going to be discovered with that, where this card's going to be nutty. And like you said, it's going to find Dockside, it's going to find Emil, it's going to find Tamer Sabertooth, it's going to find Vass's Oracle, it's going to find a whole bunch of combo pieces from the library or the graveyard, just like Finale of Devastation does. Yes, it's not an infinite mana sink to give your creatures trample and haste. Boo-hoo. There's trade-offs.
Yeah. I mean, it's a different version of the same card, but as you said, it does have a very big upside that you can use it again.
And it dodges so much counter magic that's played that's huge.
I think eventually that will be changed, but also either that or if it was prevalent, if battles became prevalent enough that maybe people start using like OG counterspell and stuff that will just
you never know. Delay still hits it, I guess. Mana Drain still hits it, but you know there are some that'll definitely stop it. But it does dodge a lot of the little 1 mana ones that are typically seen, so that's a nice upside. Yeah. Randomly, we didn't talk about other battles. There is a weird little battle that I saw that makes 2 little 1/1 blue creatures, and then on the backside, your creature spells all your spells have Convoke or something. That one could see play in a Crom deck. We didn't really mention it in the honorable mention, so that's another. There's a few battles that are very interesting to me, but too early to see if they're good or just cute. Right. This one is still good, so it's not a question mark for this one.
Right.
Next one up, it's Drana and Linvala, or Drana and Linvala, whatever. It's essentially the old Linvala. It's 2 white, a black, and a colorless for a 3/4 flyer. And here I'll read the exact text because I'll get it wrong otherwise. And I have it right here. Flying Vigilance, so it's added Vigilance to it. Activated abilities of creatures your opponents control can't be activated. So it's just like the original Linvala, or the 3/4 flying Linvala. I don't know if there's another instance of it before that. Anyway, and then the other part of it, Drana and Linvala has all activated abilities of all creatures your opponents control. You may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to activate those abilities. So that part, pretty sick. I mean, there's a bunch of abilities you're going to steal that are going to be relevant, even if it's just a simple mana ability, or if if somebody has Thrasios in play and you're stopping them, you can try and do your own Thrasios imitation, but it's a huge stacks piece upgrade. Any deck that was playing the original Linvala that's playing white and black is probably just making the switch immediately. It has the upside of being black, so it can dodge some of the removal that's played, the 0-drop black spell that kills non-black creatures. Right. Snuff Out, I think, is played in a lot of Yuriko decks. This dodges that. So being black is actually an upside for this.
I put it in my Shanid list, and I actually tutored for it specifically the other day because I was in a position where I don't recall all of the pieces on the board that had activations, but there were several. One person was a dork player, so like there was all their dorks. Plus, it was Joey. He was playing his Selvala, the OG, not Selvala, Sisay, the green-white Sisay deck. So I went and specifically tutored for this to shut his tutor ability off, and then I was also in a deck that cares about legendary creatures, and I was like, this is the perfect situation. I can use this to tutor out whatever I want. I ended up getting wheeled before I got to play it, and I was pissed, but it was going to be epic. Either way, I think even if you just play it just like old Linvala, it's still just as good, but now has vigilance.
Yeah.
Does cost weirder mana, but it's still essentially the same. It used to be 2 and 2, now it's 1, 2, 1. And then obviously being able to steal activated abilities is big. If somebody's got a Villas or a Razaketh, or they probably already won, but if you can get this in on somebody that's got something that's powerful, even like you said, Thrasios or whatever, there's plenty of activations.
Shuts down the Gila players' game plan quite a bit. They're kind of sad. I mean, there's so many good creature activated abilities that this just says no thanks. I'll borrow those. And if you're, like you said, if you're only stopping them from using them, that's pretty good. If you're actually gaining value out of it on top of it, that's just gravy. So
well, and 90% of the time you are just going to be stopping somebody from using their shit, but you're also going to now have a mana dork.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, most of the time that's probably not relevant either, but maybe you need that one extra mana to cast your Nas.
I mean, if you think about it, have there ever been another Hate Bear Stacks piece creature that's a mana dork? I don't think there has. Nothing comes to mind.
No.
So maybe that's what they've been missing this whole time, to be overpowered.
You get a Kinnan, you get a fucking Kenrith, you get a Hermit Druid, you get fucking everything. I mean, Hermit Druid obviously is not going to work because you're not going to have a deck built right. But saying, like, you got there's countless creatures even creatures that we've talked about today, like, that can, it's pretty crazy. And as stacks pieces go, most of them don't have that big of an upside. Mostly it's just shutting something down. This is shutting it down plus giving you a bonus. And like you said, even if it's not all the time, 50% of the time, 40%, 30, 25% of the time, that's still great. It's still better than OG Linvala, so
I'll take throw vigilance. You're protecting your life total with the vigilance, and you're still swinging in, so it's great.
I think also could be a very good commander. I mean, just having that alone, you're not going to get your card advantage or whatever, and Orzhov is arguably kind of weak, but there's still combos there. There's still things to do. Yeah. It could still be a commander.
I've played against it a couple of times. I have a little group that I play against locally, and we actually started throwing out videos called Amateur Hour MTG, and one of the people in that group plays this, and she has not had a great game with it so far. She's kept some sketchy hands, I'll say that. But yeah, it's definitely scary when it hits the battlefield. It definitely can. There's a few decks that see this, and they're just not having a good time. So we'll say that.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of not having a good time, next one is one that was spoiled very early, so people have built this and played it quite a bit already. It's an archetype that's already been seen, and that's Abzan Stacks. But so it's Thalia and the Gitrog monster, which lore-wise, this fucking throws me for one. Like, Gitrog monster would just eat her. I don't understand how she fucking tamed it to ride it, but okay, suspending my disbelief. Man. Like, okay,
it's the King Kong effect.
Yeah, pretty girl. Okay, you could ride my back. That's fine. So arguably okay when it comes to comparing it to Thalia. Arguably not good when you compare it to the original Gitrog monster. That's my personal opinion. Your mileage may vary. It is, though, a combination of all their colors, because Thalia was white and Gitrog was Golgari. So it's a human frog horror, costs 1 and Abzan, white, green, and black. It's a 4/4. First strike, death touch. So it's got her first strike, it's got his death touch. You can play an additional land on each of your turns. That was one of his things, too. Creatures and non-basic lands your opponent's control enter the battlefield tapped. That was not Thalia Guardian of Thraben, it's Thalia Heretic Cathar. So that's a good effect. Having a stacks piece on your commander, just like we were talking about with Drana and Linvala, that's good. This one does actually have some card draw advantage on it as well, because whenever it attacks, you can sacrifice a creature or land and draw a card. But unlike the OG Gitrog monster, you didn't get to abuse that and draw cards all the time. You can't do Dakmar salvage loops with this. It is only card draw on attack, and only if you sacrifice. It is not a May, so you have to sacrifice a creature or land. So yeah, there are some limitations there and some build around stuff that you need to do. But Abzan's in good colors for stacks. It's in good colors for ramp. It's got a lot of cheap dorks and things that you could sack. Also, you can do the Crucible of Worlds, Ramadev Excavator, that new one from last set, the artifact that lets you play lands from your graveyard. There are plenty of ways to abuse this and utilize the extra land drops and being able to sack lands to draw. And then so you're breaking parity there on stacks pieces. Your stuff is coming in untapped while your opponent's stuff is coming in tapped. So you could theoretically, drop good amount of mana, get this out quickly, stacks down the table a bit, and then start drawing cards and sacking things and end up using things. But I'm sure there's combos and things in there. I didn't really look into it too much. I know that people have been brewing it, but generally with stacks decks like this, it's kind of just break parity and try to win through beats or whatever. So
yeah, the big one I see is the sack a creature on combat trigger. I've seen some people playing this specifically with Protean Hulk because this is a way to sack your Protean Hulk. You're not going to get multiple sack, repeatable sack with just the commander here, but you got a pretty strong stacks effect and a sack outlet in the command zone. You can go get your Grand Abolisher and protect your attempt and all that stuff. So yeah,
Protean Hulk is Arena Rectors too or whatever to go get Vivian and do pod lines. So yeah, there are combos of course that you can use and win through your own stacks pieces as well. I just hate that like every deck is like, oh well, this is just a Hulk deck. Oh, this is just a consult deck. This is just a breach deck. It's like every deck like I like that these commanders are all unique and they have different abilities and they're mashing up, and it's a cool, unique idea. It reminds me of Infinity War and Marvel Comics and stuff. So like I'm into it, but at the same time I'm just like, but it's just doing the same thing something else could do better, or it's kind of fixed compared to its old counterpart. Whereas some of the other ones we did in the honorable mentions were kind of more unique and doing something a little different, but then again, those are still known combos as well. I guess that's a symptom of the meta, but
for sure.
I digress.
Yeah, I mean, I think the part about these is that having these be recognizable previously printed creatures, they kind of couldn't go too far off the rails with these without somebody getting really upset or angry, or I don't know, who knows. But yeah. I think it's kind of neat the mashup they did. I think they could have done some of the other ones could have come a little closer to the mashup like this one did. This one having relevant abilities from both pieces felt a little more synergistic than some of the other ones perhaps, but here we are.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was probably difficult for them to try and balance between two legendary creatures with their own unique flavors and ideas, so I think they did a good job with them. It was just, some of them I'm just like, okay, this is good, and I know it's going to see play. I know people are hyped about it, but I also just find it kind of boring, which is why I built some of the more obscure ones. But we didn't put any of those on this list because I don't know that they're going to be good enough.
We'll find out.
We will. One that is good enough, for sure, is our next one.
And I will butcher the pronunciation. Is it Shalai and Hallar? Is that how you say this?
That's how I would say it.
That's what I'm going with. So it's 1 red, green, white, for a legendary angel elf. It's flying, it's vigilant, it's a 3/3. Whenever 1 or more +1/+1 counters are put on a creature you control, Shalai and Hallar deal that much damage to target opponent. So the reason this card is on the list is it has 3, I believe, that I know of, specific 1-card win cons with this creature. Heliod the Suncrowned. You give this lifelink, you attacked, you put a counter on it, it shoots something, it has lifelink, you put a counter on it, it's kind of the build your own walking ballista in the command zone. War Elemental, and then also the Red Terror. They do something similar. I think they're, whenever a red creature deals damage, you put a counter on them.
So War Elemental is 3 red, it's a 1/1. When it comes into play, sacrifice unless this opponent was dealt damage this turn. Whenever damage is dealt to an opponent, put that many 1/1 counters on it. So vice versa, yeah. It would basically start an infinite loop.
Yeah, so 3 1-card win cons, all creatures in a freaking Naya deck. How stupid easy is that to tutor up? Right. It flies. It's got, it's got relevant text on it all over the place. This one will surprise win out of nowhere. It'll steal games. It's
very much the same thing that we've already mentioned as far as like Rocco and Minsk and whatever. Yep. There's several Naya commanders that have come up in the last couple of years that lend themselves directly to pod lines and Hulk lines and other things. I don't think that you really run Hulk here because you don't really need to grab like piles of creatures. You really only need one creature at a time. So I think you do run, at least the build that I brewed for this, you do run a Arena Rector to go get Vivian to pod into your Red Terror or whatever. Does require other creatures, unfortunately, so you're going to need something else that's the right appropriate CMC to go get that, because you don't want to sack your commander to it. But
what's the other one? The other Arena Rector and Academy Rector. One of them goes and gets an enchantment, right?
Academy Rector goes and gets you could go get your Heliod, yeah.
Yeah, there you go, right away. So yeah, definitely an option.
That would work.
So,
and then otherwise you're running, your birthing pod, and that's probably about it to try and help. And then you've got you got that new battle, you've got your finale, you've got your nature's natural order and your quarter calling and yada yada. So there's lots of ways to get one of those creatures into play. Well, some of those, a couple of those you can't, because they only get green creatures. But
but you have Worldly Tutor, or you have Court of Calling, or
Enlightened Tutor also gets Heliod. So yeah,
there's a billion one card win cons with this particular general. Like you said, it's similar to Minsk, it's similar to Rocco. It's Naya, crazy went out of nowhere creature stuff. So it probably lends itself very, very well to sitting behind stacks, because all of its combo creatures are creatures. So those are usually the best thing to play behind stacks, because a lot of stacks pieces don't affect them, like Deafening Silence, for instance. So yeah, this one will definitely see quite a bit of play. Whether it proves to be stronger than Rocco or Minsk, I don't know, maybe not. But it'll definitely see play, and people will try it.
Already looking at it, I would argue that it's pretty close to the other two. I think Rocco is probably edging both of them out currently. People seem to be higher on Rocco than they are on Minx, but that's also maybe a 6 months gap between the two of them coming out.
Yeah, fair.
When I built Minx, it was the Naya whole commander, and it did the thing, and it did it well, and it still does it well to this day. And it got extra tools with Vivian, etc. But it's not technically as fast as Rocco, just because Rocco can go tutor the thing right away and tutor a lot of things right away. And I've seen Rocco's win really fast, but I've won really fast with Minx. So I think it's got the same potential. I do like that it uses some unique cards like that War Elemental and the Red Terror, because like the Red Terror people were talking about when that got spoiled. They're like, "Oh, this is cool. This will do something." And this is like the card that it needed to do something.
Yeah, I mean, it combos with All Will Be One, that red enchantment too. But again, how often do you see that play? This will certainly see more play than that, I would guess.
I would guess too. So moving along to the next one. This made it on the list solely because it's the only 5-color commander in the set, and it's the only 5-color commander we've gotten in a little bit. I want to say it's been at least a couple sets since we got a 5-color.
Who can remember anymore?
Like the last one I can remember coming up was like the One-Eye guy, fucking Garth.
Garth?
Yeah,
I love Garth.
Yeah, that was an interesting one. But anyhow, this is a new 5-color commander, and it is the thing that everybody's been waiting for. Omnath is finally 5-color. He started as a lowly mono green commander, slowly got red, and then got blue, and then got white, and he's finally gotten black. But black isn't by itself, it's a Phyrexian black, because he's now completed. He's a Phyrexian elemental. It's Omnath Locus of All. It's white, blue, Phyrexian black, red, and green for a 4/4. If you would lose unspent mana, that mana becomes black instead. Now, we questioned this before we were recording, because the way that reads, it doesn't say anything about not losing that mana as steps and phases end. But according to Gatherer, the rulings, it does. It stays. He's a black mana battery. You can sit on that black mana for as long as you want until Omnath is removed. If Omnath's removed, you have until the end of that particular phase to use the mana, and then it's gone. Either way, you get him out, you cast stuff, and then you tap your extra mana on end steps or whatever just to get that extra mana banked up. It's kind of like old school Crewfix or whatever. I think there's a
original green Omnath, I think, banked a bunch of green mana, didn't he?
He did that too. Then there was Crewfix that turned it into colorless, and then I think that there was some red creature that did it too.
That sounds right.
For the rest of his card, it says at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, look at the top card of your library. You may reveal that card if it has 3 or more colored mana symbols in its mana cost. So when I first read that, I thought maybe 3 different mana symbols. No, it could be 3. It could just be Doomsday, 3 black pips. Done. If you do reveal it, that is, add 3 mana in any combination of its color. So in this case, it'd be 3 black. Put it in your hand. and if you don't reveal it, you just put it in your hand. So you basically get to look at the card, and if it doesn't have 3 pips, you just put it in your hand, so it's an extra card draw. If it does have the 3 pips, then you can reveal it and get the mana, and then potentially use that mana. So like in the case of Doomsday, you reveal Doomsday, you get 3 black, and then you cast Doomsday, and people go, oh shit. And this is pre-combat main phase, so it's not like it's during combat, so you can just go from there, if possible. So it's a decent body. Seems kind of weak, given that some of the other versions of him were a little stronger, but I guess he's been a 4/4 for a while. He used to be a 6/6. Either way. The mana banking part seems good, just because, I mean, if nothing else, it's colorless mana. You know, it's just extra mana for you to use no matter what you're doing. And then if you do happen to have black pips, it's good. It does kind of require a little bit of build around unless you're just going for like Doomsday in particular. But generally, you're going to want to have multiple things with 3 color pips just to have, you know, a few hits. But that's a slippery slope where you end up potentially putting too many of those in, and then you can never cast anything because you're in 5 color. You're probably wanting to have a lower curve, so it's a tricky build around, but I think having that extra ability to have mana laying around could make it a little easier to cast some of the things. So.
I mean, one of the cards we talked about earlier on the list, the Hoarding Broodlord, would trigger this guy to get 3 black mana for free. Peer into the Abyss will give you 3 black mana. I'm curious how he works with hybrid symbols. I'm guessing he doesn't. I'm guessing it's like hybrid blue-red and a green, it's probably only 2. But
I think it would count, because the same way Phyrexian symbols would count as a colored mana. I think it would count. It would just be not different colors. It would just be a singular pip. So if you've got 3 hybrid mana symbols on there, like what's that one in Winota that's the double striker? It's like 4 of them. Like that guy. Yeah. I would assume that guy would count, and you would add. But then I don't know how you would add the mana. I guess we'd have to look at the Gatherer again, but I don't have it up anymore. So
definitely a weird one. But yeah, I think this one. I mean, the four mana and 2 life to cast him, draw or put a card in your hand so it gets around. Only draw 1 card per turn stuff, and possibly add mana and just being a mana battery sink. Might be one of the better Peer into the Abyss commanders we've seen in a while, just for that ability alone. But yeah, this one will be interesting. I think it's nothing super exciting or broken from the command zone. It's just solid value. It's kind of Kenrith like in the command zone for the value aspect. Just doesn't have the combo potential. But
yeah, it's
maybe
not something that you're gonna food chain or anything like that. It's not really. I mean, honestly, it's 5 colors. So you can build it however the fuck you want. It's just a matter of, like you said, like I would think you would lean into the black because of it saving black for you, and you would lean into the peers and the other things that have that. I can't think of too many other. Well, there's that brooding thing that we talked about. Is Villas or isn't Villas 3 black pips?
Razakat and Villas might both be. Is Razakat 3 black as well? I think it might be too.
I think
they
both are. I think they're both like 3 and 4, or 3 and 5, something like that.
Yeah, so those could definitely be potentially. I mean, there's like you said, it's 5 color soup. You could build it however you want.
It's basically like a mono black deck that's splashing a few other colors, but you could also have shit like Enter the Infinite in here or whatever too, because it's got 3 pips, and then you bank a bunch of mana to pay for the colorless version. You have your 3 blue, and you just draw your whole deck, and but that's the same thing you'd be doing with Doomsday or whatever. So yeah, it's got potential. I basically put it on here just because it is a 5 color commander and it's interesting. It's also the completion of the Omnath cycle, and that was kind of cool to see happen over the years.
Yeah, somebody will build something. I mean, it'll, like you said, it's definitely versatile. It can be Swiss Army box. Or Swiss Army knife. You can build it however you want. Somebody will do something pretty cool with it. I think it's always going to be a threat because it's a 4 mana commander that draws cards and adds mana. So it's command zone value. And you can build the deck, so you never know what the heck your opponent's going to be doing with it. Is it better than the other 5 color options that exist? Who knows? Probably not, but it's at least unique, and who knows?
It'll do something. Well, last one is yours. It's the new Rona.
Yeah. Don't worry, nobody's going to catch it. Sorry. Rona, Herald of Invasion.
But
1 blue. Yeah, terrible, I know. Dad joke, sorry guys. 1 blue and 1 for a 1/3 human wizard.
Your age is showing.
Yeah, fact. I think it's already showing between this and this, but anywho. 1 blue 1 for a 1/3 human wizard. Whenever you cast a legendary spell, untap Rona, Herald of Invasion, tap it, draw a card, then discard a card, and it's got 5 colorless and a black Phyrexian mana. Transform it to do some shit on the backside, which is completely irrelevant for every intent and purpose of cEDH as far as I'm concerned. I could read it if you want, but I don't think I'm going to because it's not relevant. So there. The idea with this, it's obviously you're in Dimir, so you can do the Thassa's Oracle, Demonic Consultation, Tainted Pact that everyone's familiar with. Yep. The bigger and more interesting piece of this is it's a 1-card win con with Wishclaw Talisman. The idea here is
of all things,
right? A tutor that becomes a win con. Who loves that? Which is why I think this might be the best Isochron, Scepter, and Dramatic Reversal commander as well, because it also does the thing with those. But anyway, you activate Wishclaw Talisman. You tutor for one of 2 spells. There's Banishing Knack, and the other one is Retraction Helix. 1 blue instant. They're both the same card, just with a different name. 1 blue instant until end of turn. Target creature gains tap. Return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. So you activate your Wishclaw, you find one of these. You cast this targeting Rona, you tap Rona, you pick up your Wishclaw, you recast your Wishclaw, you activate your Wishclaw, you go find either Mox Opal, Mox Amber, both legendary, doesn't matter. You cast those, and by the way, each time you're casting your artifacts, which are legendary spells, you're untapping Rona. So then you start casting these, untap Rona, tap them for mana, tap Rona to bounce it to your hand, wash, rinse, repeat. Now you have infinite mana of every color that you want. Then you tap your tap Rona, pick up Wishclaw, use your infinite mana and your infinite Wishclaws to tutor your entire freaking deck to your hand and win. If you can't win with tutoring your entire deck to your hand, I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, you should probably win. At
that point. Stupid low cost commander with loot ability right in the command zone. It's not draw, it's just filter. Unless filling your graveyard matters. Hey, you're in black. Imagine that. Yeah, this card's going to see some play. It's going to be I think it might be the strongest Dimir ISO Rev commander they've ever printed. I mean, they just gave us Vohar freaking like yesterday. It was a very good ISO Rev commander that can 1-card win con with a Tainted Pact or Demonic Consultation, which you're definitely playing in the decks anyway. This one, I think, is even stronger.
Yeah, unfortunate that it's rare because it's ironic you mentioned those 2 cards, the Banishing Knack and the other one. Those 2 are part of a Pauper Commander combo. I don't recall what the other pieces are, but yeah, it's too bad that this is a rare. If this was an uncommon legendary, this would be a slam dunk for a Pauper Commander as well.
It'd be destroying Pauper for sure. Yeah, and being a 1/3/2, I mean, it dodges are into the fire, so you can't get burned out by that. And Wishclaw Talisman, for crying out loud, you're in black and blue. How many black tutors and blue artifact tutors specifically do you freaking need to find this? I mean,
Muddle the Mixture is now a counter and tutors your win con. Yeah. And it's not just like tutors a piece, it tutors your actual win con.
Yeah, it's bonkers.
That is pretty insane. Now, granted, you do need to be packing stuff like Solve the Equation and probably Mystical Tutor and whatever else to get the Helix.
Yeah, I mean, there's
thing.
Transmute, what is it?
Dizzy
Transmute
spell.
Artifacts or... because you can.
I was talking about to get the. Oh yeah, I guess you just get those pieces with the Wishclaw.
Activate the stupid Wishclaw and get it, and then you give the Wishclaw away, and then you pick up your own Wishclaw, and hey, look, I found my tutor again. So it's ridiculous.
You don't even need the spell tutors.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. This card is this creature will see quite a bit of play. The only downside to it is it's not 4-color soup, so you can't play Dockside and all the other busted crap you can play in cEDH. Right. Other than that, this card's nuts.
And then, yeah, if you do, for some reason, flip it, just for the sake of argument, it becomes a 5/5 with Trample, and whenever a source deals damage to it, that source's controller exiles a card from their hand at random. If it's a land, you can put it on the battlefield under your control, otherwise you may cast it without paying its mana cost. So, as much as that's not relevant, hear me out. There are going to be days where you're trying to do your thing or whatever, you get stopped, or there's just stacks on the board where you can't do, like, an oof. So now you can't activate your Wishclaw Talisman Recon, or you can't do your ISO Rev combo either. So in this case, you just, you flip her, and then you start swinging around, and if they block, you get free shit out of their hand. And if they don't block, you're doing 5 damage to them. So that's a pretty quick clock, especially in a mid game. So
the argument I would make for it, and I agree, you're not wrong. There are corner cases for everything. I'm certain I will build this at some point, and I will flip this at some point, and I will eat my words because I will jam it down somebody's throat until they're dead. But the other nice thing about this, banishing Knack, for instance, the retraction helix, 1 blue mana, target creature gains, tap it, return target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. So all you do is you cast your Wishclaw, or you keep it in hand, you play this on your Rona, you tap Rona to bounce their stupid oof to their hand, you cast your Wishclaw, you untap Rona, and boom, you're off to the races.
Yep. There's always some sort of options. It does seem very powerful. I kind of skipped over that one prior to you bringing it to my attention. But again, half of the cards that I wanted to talk about ended up in the honorable mentions. So,
there are so many more we cut that we're probably missing on a bunch of really either corner case or just super good cards. This set, like you said from the beginning, great options, tons of interesting cards, tons of power. It'll change the format at least in some way, and that's awesome. I'm very happy the Wizards gave us something with quite a bit of interesting little pieces to make me go through my 50 different decks and tweak all of them. That's what I love. So
yeah, and I mean, honestly, like we said, this isn't a power ranking or that these are better than any of the ones that were in the honorable mentions, because some of those cards may be great in the right deck and you value them more than some of these others. And there's probably spells that we glossed over that are probably worth talking about, but at the end of the day, this is what we thought was most viable in our experience with our decks and other things that we've seen in the format. But let us know in the comments if you have differing opinions, if there's something we missed, or if you think that we over or underrated some of these cards. I'd love to hear anything about how one of these other cards like combos or does something that I didn't think about, because it takes all of us to solve these problems. So
absolutely, and I'd love to hear anybody in the comments, specifically the Angel of Glory's Rise versus Karmic Guide loops. I'm curious what's better for the Kroxa and Kunoros deck, because I'm building that freaking deck. So give me pointers, people. Let me know what you think is better and why. I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, and also, I think that this set kind of had some pieces that are like slam dunks in multiple decks, and then there's a lot of like commanders in particular. And I think a lot of these commanders are going to be, kind of flavor of the month and then moved away from, because they did something unique or whatever, but they are still kind of just playing the same sort of combos that we already have commanders doing. And I love to have the variety and trying different ones, because one commander may speak to you more than another, even though it's doing the same thing as the other one. So in that regard, I like it, but I do think some of these mashups and things, they're going to be around for a little while, and then they're going to go away. And I think it's the pieces like the Hoarding Broodlord and the Phyrexian Censor, the Faerie Mastermind, the Into the Fire, the Battle. Those kinds of cards are going to see play for a lot longer. Because, like you said, with Rona in particular, it was what was it, Vohar?
Vohar was that stupid blue-black creature that I love that card, and I know Joey and your buddies played that, and so
it came out in like 6 months ago, and now we already have another card that does the same thing better. So these kinds of things, I think the commanders in particular, like, they end up getting replaced because there's just something that gets pushed the right way, or it's just got one more color, or it's one pip less to cast it, so it ends up being quote-unquote better because it's more efficient. So my prediction for some of the cards from this set is that I think that if they're not seeing play in the 99, a lot of these that are commander options may end up falling out of favor, within the next year or two. But I think some of the pieces are going to see play for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, there are some, Borborygmos and Fibblethip is one I'm building that I love, that's probably, we didn't talk about. I know you built Goro, and what's the other one?
I built Goro Satoru, which is just Grixis good stuff with the ability to make some dragons here and there. And then I built Kari Zev and Baral. And I made that into a polymorph deck, which obviously there's a ton of polymorph types of decks out there, and that's probably not the best one to do it with, but I was trying to try something new and be unique with what I was building. But again, that's the kind of thing where a couple years from now, I probably won't even have that deck put together. It was just a fun thing, and time capsule this period of time, and then we move on from it. But that's
one I know I'll see for years is the Slimefoot and Squee from the Squee's Knees. He's building that, of course, and one of the guys we play with occasionally, and he will 1,000,000% have that built for probably all of time. So That's another one that's a good John build that does some crazy shenanigans with Dockside. So
I think that there are probably even more beyond that. I know Zymone and Dina do some stuff.
Yeah.
It's another Hulk deck. There's so many. It was very
even
hard for
Yargle and
us.
Multani can do weird crap. I mean, yeah, there's so many choices from this set. It's amazing.
You only need what? 19, 20. You only need 3 extra damage on it. It's a one shot. So, I mean, not very hard to do. But, I mean, at the end of the day, we looked through these cards and it was like, okay, these are obvious. These are not. We're going to pick some of the ones that we like, some of the ones that we thought were worth highlighting, and hopefully there's something here, or through us discussing it, there's something here that you find that you maybe didn't think about or gain some information on to make some choices for yourself. But that's basically where we're at. This is where we feel the cards would go. Again, your mileage may vary. Hopefully you take it with a grain of salt, but also hopefully you learn something.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're back next time with our, what is it? Are we doing the top 5 instance of each color? Is that what we're looking for our next video?
Yep. Next up is continuing our series. We did the top 5 creatures in each color and multicolor. Next up is top 5 instance for each, and then we've got sorceries, artifacts, lands, yada yada. So that's going to be continuing. We'll probably sprinkle in some stuff. I mean, there'll be another set to talk about within a couple months for sure.
If not weeks.
Right. So I'm sure Lord of the Rings will be out before we know it. We'll be doing a set review for that. And then beyond that, we're going to continue to do that series until we get that done. And we might even throw in some other discussion topics if something comes up that we feel is worth breaking it up, so people don't get bored of just list after list. But whatever the case, I hope you guys enjoyed. And if you wouldn't mind leaving us likes, comments, and subscriptions to the YouTube channel here. And also, don't forget to follow us on Spotify or wherever you find your podcasts, and leave a review, leave comments, etc. We love the feedback. We'd love to hear what you guys think about what we had to say. And we're going to keep plugging along. We'll see you guys in a couple weeks, and enjoy the rest of your day, night, evening, whatever the case may be.
Take care.
See you later.